Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dagger, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Gojko Adzic. And I tried that. I'm not sure if I'm right. We'll get it straightened out.
Close enough. Thank you.
Okay, he is a strategic software delivery consultant who works with ambitious teams to improve the quality of their software products and processes. He specializes in Agile and lean quality improvement, in particular Agile testing, specification by example, and behavior-driven development. Gojko, thanks for joining me. And I, for one, have way too many of your books. Well, is that way where I'm starting to see where people are talking about DevOps as a thing of the past? I mean, does it fit into the future of Agile?
It's one of those things that is completely mind-blowing to me that there are people in this world who are not doing it, like automated testing. When I started working as a developer, I started working with very small teams, and in very small teams, everybody had to do everything. So as a developer, you have to do everything, and because you have to do everything, you have to reduce everything that's kind of not delivering value directly. So things that are kind of repetitive, reproducible, automatable tasks get automated without anybody even thinking about that. And then I started working with large companies where you have the entire operations department. There's kind of 50 people whose entire purpose in life is to click on a button to move the software from one machine to another. That completely didn't make sense to me, but yes, I recognize that such a thing exists. And I've seen lots and lots of companies doing that later as a consultant, but I was always confused why anybody in their right mind would set it up to work like that. So I think DevOps, in a sense, is something that people should be doing anyway. And yes, kind of reducing the cost of maintenance, reducing any kind of variability is pretty good there, because that should be a reliable, reproducible, automated process. On the other hand, that fits in perfectly with what I mentioned earlier. That is a solved problem. For anybody wanting to do that, there's 30 years of work where people have written books about how to do it right, how to configure things. There's brilliant material there that's accessible to everybody for almost free, how to do that right. Companies that are not doing that because they are either ignorant or they just, do not want to deliver software the right way. But in a sense, that's a solved problem. I don't think there's anything particularly interesting to kind of innovate there or research there. That is a completely solved problem.
Well, you painted the picture of where we're at and, somewhat of where we're going. But how are we going to make money with software in the future? Is this why platforms is that extension of your software product that we're building? That we're adding platforms to things now.
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? So I think some of the things that's
the kind of questions we ask on the podcast.
Yeah,
$1 million questions.
I think from what I'm seeing, selling subscriptions or selling services tends to be still a good business model. There's lots of companies that are making a killing on recurring subscriptions, where that's something that users generally don't like. As a customer, I do not like being billed every month for stuff. But if you look at companies like Netflix or I guess Amazon with Prime or things like that, Dropbox, they're all selling a subscription. So I think selling software unless you are Oracle is pretty much a no-go. And even for Oracle, the big question is how long people are going to kind of still keep buying software. With the whole Amazon cloud thing, I would assume Oracle as a database kind of operating system and a business system organized around their big database, that's possibly a thing that's, going to a graveyard over the next 10, 15 years, because everybody's moving towards the cloud. And I think, selling Tesla cars is a interesting thing, but then you're really selling a product. You're not selling software, although there's an argument there that a Tesla car is more software than anything else. Selling capacity, like I guess Dropbox is selling the capacity to store things there and scaling that. GitHub is selling capacity, things like that. That's something that makes sense. Or selling a service like Uber is. I think those are the things that people still pay, although the software is free. And in most of those cases, effectively, the software is free.
You pay for when a service is rendered, when you kind of, that service dominant logic thinking, when you co-create, with the customers when you pay for that service, right?
Over the next 5 years, definitely maybe kind of slightly longer, services on the internet and capacity are going to be a lot easier to sell than software, and a lot more sustainable for software development organizations. As I said, if you have a mobile app and you've taken $2.99 from somebody because it's a race to the bottom and you can't really sell that anymore and everybody's offering apps for free, that $2.99 doesn't really go a long way. You've spent that by replying to 2 emails that people are going to have. So it's a really difficult proposition to sell software anymore, but selling a service or giving the software away for free so you get people to pay you for a subscription to host things on your site or to... That's why I think there's such a proliferation of software as a service platforms and cloud platforms and things like that, because by keeping your data captive, they can effectively extort a rent, which is a kind of service model. And that still makes sense. Otherwise, I don't think selling software makes sense anymore.
Well, I have to ask you, you have a lot of thoughts about the future. You have a lot of thoughts of where software may or may not be going. But what's upcoming for you? You've been putting out a book a year, it seems like, for a while here, okay? Do you have another book in the works?
Yeah, I have 3 books in the works. I just can't decide which one makes sense to complete. I'm really interested about the financial implications of the new generation of cloud platforms that started to really mature last year. And that's where a lot of my kind of thinking, a lot of my work is going at the moment. I'm with some friends, I'm building a collaboration tool, and we have re-engineered the whole thing so that we can get the financial benefits out of this whole function as a service or serverless, or kind of, there's lots of buzzwords going around there. And I'm absolutely amazed with what that's enabled us to do and how that's going to completely transform kind of the financial proposition of software over the next, I think, 5 to 10 years. So I don't think that's a solved problem yet. There's a lot of innovation in that space, and there are a lot of changes in that space, and everything is shifting. So I don't really have all the answers, but the potential implications of where these platforms are going is incredibly interesting. For those of your listeners that don't really know what I'm talking about now, somewhere kind of about a year ago, Amazon enabled people to deploy applications to their infrastructure and pay Amazon per request, which means that when your software is being used, you pay. When your software is not being used, you don't pay for anything. And the whole billing structure and the whole platform is designed so that a lot of the traditional operations things that you need to do, like monitoring, scaling, availability, they're all taken care by Amazon. And if you design your software properly, it's pretty much ready to go at Amazon scale on their infrastructure. And if it's being used, you pay as much as it's being used. It's like compute on tap. If it's not being used, you don't pay. So kind of that's a really interesting financial proposition, because if you can kind of design your software so that You're billing your customers for a service, which is kind of where I think we're going. And how much you're billing for the service is more than how much you're spending on Amazon to kind of operate the whole thing, then it's a very, very clear financial proposition how that software makes money. Very, very quickly after Amazon started releasing that, all the other cloud platforms started following. So Google has something they call Google Cloud Functions. On Amazon, this is called Amazon Lambda. Microsoft has these things called Azure Functions. IBM is running this thing called OpenWhisk. Everybody's trying to play catch up here, and the financial proposition of the whole platform is completely mind-blowing if you can kind of re-architect your app to do that. And I think that's going to have an amazing impact on how we design our software and how we operate software over the next 5 to 10 years. It's in its infancy now as a technology. Sorry, not as a technology. It's in its infancy now as a business model. As a technology, they're just using things that were already there 5 years ago. Yes, they've been optimized a bit, but technically, kind of these things are not that particularly interesting. This is the first time ever, I think, that you can get compute infrastructure on demand, but truly on demand. Not on demand by saying, I'm going to rent 5 computers for you, or I'm going to rent 50 virtual machines, or I'm going to rent a database, or I'm going to rent this, I'm going to rent that. This is where the entire stack is on demand, as in the customer requesting the system to do something. And it shifts the whole financial proposition away from how much capacity do we need, how do we scale this, how do we scale that, do we need 50 servers or do we need 100 servers, or do we need, these machines here and those machines there. It shifts it to what do we need to service customer requests, and what customer requests are valuable, what customer requests are a waste of money for us.
I enjoyed the conversation very much, but we got to end it somewhere, okay? And I think that this is a good place. What's the best way for someone to get a hold of you and to stay up to speed with what you're talking about?
I speak at lots of conferences, so find me at a conference. My website is gojko.net. It's Gojko with a J. Probably the best place to keep up to date.
You're on Twitter and on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. All the links are on the website. It's very difficult to pronounce a Twitter link, especially for kind of a Slavic name, and get people to actually understand it. But if you have a website for the podcast, I'm sure you can include that.
I'll include the link in there, and I definitely want to thank you for all your time and
thank you.
The knowledge that you've shared. I had a great time.
It was a pleasure.
This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So I want to thank everyone for listening.
Thanks.